Jenny, a storm has risen over the weekend because doctors have opposed same-sex marriage. Why is there such a storm about this?
Well, it happens that the Doctors for the Family is a group that's been set up to promote family values, and they actually made a submission to the Senate inquiry that's being conducted currently into same-sex marriage. And in their statement to the Senate inquiry, they made a couple of statements, and the media have picked those up and are criticising them for the statements they've made.
But why aren't they allowed to be free to make their submission the same as everybody else has made theirs?
Well, officially, that's what they're doing. They're saying, we've made our submission, everybody else has a right to do that. But of course, that many of those who are promoting the homosexual agenda might talk about tolerance, but in many respects what we're seeing is that they're not very tolerant about other people's views. And unfortunately, that's part of the nature of the debate we see.
But one of these people was actually the deputy psychologist for Victoria?
Well, there have been some quite significant people have actually agreed that with the statements made in the inquiry. And Peter, you've looked at the actual inquiry to see what they've said. What are the key things that the submission to the inquiry actually stated from the Doctors for the Family?
I guess the main thing they're saying is that they believe that marriage as defined is the basis of a healthy society, and of course we would agree with that. And it seems very strange that to make that sort of statement today is non sonus grata, or whatever that phrase might be, well, but they just don't want anybody to be able to speak against their push for same-sex marriage, do they?
Well, it's almost seen as hate speech, and in fact the doctors who've organised this group have actually said they're receiving a lot of hate speech from people who think that they shouldn't be able to say these things. One of the things they said is that the evidence shows that children do best brought up by their biological mother and father who are married, and we know that the evidence shows that, but almost for saying that, they're being criticised.
What about the health risks of homosexuality itself? I mean, they're well documented. We know that something like there's 44 times more chance of men getting HIV/AIDS if they engage in homosexual sex than the rest of the community. Why are these things so pushed under the carpet that nobody wants to talk about the risks?
Well, that's right, and we know that the official government statistics actually show that 80 to 85% of those who have actually contracted AIDS in this country have been men, homosexual men engaged in male same-sex homosexual practices. And so what we see there is that when they mention this is sort of like, well, you can't say that. And yet many of the homosexual sites and websites actually notify their people about the risks of homosexual sexual activity.
And it's not just HIV, is it? It's gonorrhea, syphilis, and a number of sexually transmitted diseases that are far higher rates within the homosexual community, even the lesbian community, than in the community generally.
Well, that's right. Many of these are evident of promiscuity in general, but within the homosexual community there has been a big increase in syphilis and gonorrhea and so on in the last few years, and the homosexual press have been talking about that and encouraging their people to actually try and avoid these diseases.
And there are plenty of even homosexual websites that actually point out the dangers in engaging homosexual sex.
Well, I think what happens is that it's almost as though they can talk about it themselves, but if anybody actually says that there's a problem here or uses that as just as a reason in their submission to say this is a problem and we shouldn't be endorsing the relationship, shouldn't be endorsing same-sex marriage, then they're seen as the worst in the world. They're accused of hate speech and so on.
So this really comes back to an issue of free speech. The society is being steamrolled into doing something that a lot of people in society don't want to do. And I think it's time that we took a strong stand on this issue. This is about people's right to speak about the truth. What is the evidence out there? And we know that the evidence strongly suggests that homosexuality, apart from being unnatural, is very unhealthy. And when people try to shut down that sort of information, I think we're in a very dangerous position in this country. So we would say to you, please start speaking up about the real dangers. Not just that we think marriage is separate, it should be kept for heterosexuals, but the real dangers of moving down this track.